The Allen Line Company appreciates all of the dedicated carriers it takes to move loads across the U.S. Stay safe.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Redding.
For many years, New Jersey has collected a corporate tax, and the government there applied it to truckers who met its definition of doing business in the state. Now enforcement is stepping up. Scott Thompson talks with OOIDA's Doug Morris and Paul Torlina. Does FMCSA do a good job of determining which carriers are safe enough to be on the road? And does their system need updating? I'll discuss that and more with OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. And finally, 4 states are taking actions designed to alleviate the truck parking shortage. Meanwhile, in Utah, a new law takes aim at those who take part in road rage. Scott gets the details from our state legislative expert, Keith Goebel. But first, the news with Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. The task force dedicated to examining the lease purchase model in the trucking industry met on Thursday, and a consensus is starting to take shape. The truck leasing task force has been holding meetings for months, over which time members have heard from a number of people who got caught up in predatory lease purchase agreements and paid a hefty price. It's something several task force members have underlined as a real problem, providing examples. And 2 members in particular said Thursday they've come around as well. Tamara Brock and Steve Rush had previously defended keeping the lease purchase model intact, but now they have a new position. Brock, a licensed freight broker and independent owner-operator, explained how what she heard during a task force meeting that was held in March at the Mid-America Trucking Show in Louisville, Kentucky, changed her mind.
Because when I first started with this committee, I was gung-ho about saving the lease purchase, and this should be an opportunity for people to be able to purchase a truck that don't have good money down or great credit. But over the past months that we've been meeting, especially when we went to the truck show in Louisville, it just changed my mind completely. And after the contracts that I've been collecting over since we came back from Louisville, also with videos of stories from the lease purchase drivers and the horrendous things that they are going through right now, it just kind of totally changed my whole perspective.
The same goes for Steve Rush of Carbon Express, who is chair of the truck leasing task force.
So, Tamara, I'm so glad that you came before me, because I changed my mind a couple of meetings ago when I heard you speak. And after Louisville, and after a lot more consideration of this whole process, the lease purchase model needs to go away. It needs to be outlawed, because the evil, and I mean that, the evil that's coming out of it far surpasses the minuscule parts that are good. It needs to go away. And I also think from my life history in the industry, which you all know is it's almost as long as Methuselah now, the owner-operator model needs to be looked at across the board, almost regulated, because it's abused. And so they've first abused the owner-operator model by itself, and then they just keep whittling it down until they got this lease purchase model. It's terrible what they're doing to these people.
Thursday's meeting also included discussions on whether truck leasing agreements properly incentivize the safe operation of vehicles. At previous meetings, it had been suggested that truck drivers in bad financial agreements would be motivated to operate in an unsafe manner so that they could log more miles and haul as many loads as possible. The meeting also included a presentation by Ryan Kelly of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau on submitted leases for commercial motor vehicles. Kelly says what they found is concerning.
I don't want to run too far ahead of our discussion next month, but I will tee up for the task force that in some general high-level sense, if a financial contract fails 90% of the time, it is designed to fail. that is not an accident, that's going beyond credit risk. So just for your consideration, and this will be a topic next month that we'll go into in depth.
Kelly said he would have more of the Bureau's findings at the next meeting, which is scheduled for July 18th. The public is invited to provide comments. We've got a link with more information at landlinenow.com. The Energy Information Administration has revised its forecast of average diesel prices for this year and next. It's all inside the agency's newest short-term energy outlook. EIA had previously said it expected diesel prices to settle in at $4 a gallon this year and $4.20 a gallon next year, but the new forecast puts both numbers lower at $3.90 a gallon for the remainder of 2024 and $4 flat for 2025. EIA also expects an increase in daily crude oil production in several regions over the coming months in the United States. An 8% increase in the Permian Basin, which accounts for nearly half of the country's crude oil production, is pushing the bullish forecast. Retail sales volumes of used Class 8 trucks were up 7.4% in May, defying expectations. That's according to new data from ACT Research. Steve Tam, the firm's vice president, said in a news release that all signs pointed to a decline as retail sales of used trucks in May are typically 6 points below normal. Add a soft freight environment, flat rates, and elevated borrowing costs into the equation, and the increase runs counter to expectations. Predatory towing practices remain a major concern across the trucking industry. The OOIDA Foundation recently released a one-page fact sheet detailing just how bad the problem is and what OOIDA is doing to try and fix it. The foundation teamed up with the American Transportation Research Institute for a report which found that nearly 30% of crash-related tows included some form of predatory billing. The percentage more than doubles to 66% with invoices of $30,000 or more. For comparison, the pre-tax average for a crash-related tow was about $8,900. The average bills identified as predatory were more than double that total at more than $18,000. When surveyed, 82% of motor carriers listed excessive rates and 81% listed unwarranted additional service charges as the two most common and serious forms of predatory towing. In response, groups in multiple states, including OOIDA, have been pushing for more regulation over the towing industry. Several states have recently pursued new laws and regulations designed to tamp down on the problem, including Arkansas, Colorado, Maryland, and Tennessee. And finally, the state of Nevada has plans to install digital signs that let truckers know how much truck parking is available at rest areas. But before that plan gets put into motion, the state wants to hear from truckers themselves. The system is being designed for use along Interstates 15 and 80. An 18-question survey asked truckers to chime in on how they like to receive information about truck parking availability. In addition to providing feedback about the digital signs, the survey is asking general questions about truck parking on Interstates 15 and 80, including how often drivers find parking along them, how long it takes to find a spot, and where they park when there is no authorized parking to be found. Federal data indicates Nevada is doing relatively well when it comes to truck parking, but analysis from the Nevada DOT reveals some gaps throughout the state. Recent Jason's Law surveys show that the state has more truck parking than most states, but NDOT has noted a shortage in northern Nevada, while more warehouse developments in the south are driving up demand. To participate in the newest survey, we've got a link at landlinenow.com. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Scott. Next, we'll find out what you need to know about a corporate tax in New Jersey from OOIDA's Doug Morris and Paul Torlina. I'll cover potential changes to FMCSA's safety fitness determination with OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs Jay Grimes, and Scott Thompson discusses states taking action on truck parking with our state legislative expert Keith Goebel. We'll be back in just a moment with more of the show. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Every year, 28 million people are trafficked globally. The Your Roads, Their Freedom campaign seeks to raise awareness in the transport industry. Truck and bus drivers, be vigilant on the roads. If you see something suspicious, text 233-733 or be free.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
Firestone tires are for more of everything, with more durability for more miles and more confidence in your fleet. Firestone's tested tires help fleets save with value where it matters most. Learn more at bridgestonenationalfleet.com/4moremiles.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Welcome back to Landline Now. The state of New Jersey is apparently back to enforcing a law that imposes a tax on truckers who do business in the Garden State. Joining us with details and context and analysis are Doug Morris and Paul Torlina. Doug is OOIDA's Director of State Government Affairs, and he joins us on the phone from Washington, D.C. Doug, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And Paul is Advocacy Counselor for OOIDA, and he joins us here in Studio A. Paul, good to see you.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
So this is a somewhat complicated matter that really dates back decades, but we'll try to keep it as simple as we can here. Doug, we're talking about something called Nexus, which I think is basically just a fancy word for the constitutional requirement that a state can only tax an interstate business when they're doing business with that state. Before we get into what New Jersey is doing right now, can you explain for us kind of what these Nexus campaigns are all about in general?
Yeah, basically it's a tax scheme where the state has decided that, hey, any motor carrier that's doing business within our state and does over a certain amount of money or does a certain amount of trips, that they have to pay tax within our state. I mean, they call it the Nexus campaign, and we understand that they're starting to ramp up their investigations on this again. I think back in mid-2000s they were doing it, and obviously the states are trying to drum up money, and this is the way they drum up money, and they're doing it now. They're sending investigators out to weigh stations, warehouses, trade shows, and basically asking drivers, what is your business here in New Jersey? Where are you from? And what happens is a lot of times if they don't get the right answers they need, they'll send a questionnaire out to the motor carrier, and if that questionnaire is not answered, then you get put on what's called it's like a hit list, and you come back through the state again, and they basically fine you, I think $500 or whatever they want to fine you, and if they do have information that you do owe taxes, they can basically put out a warrant of execution right there and then, and you have to pay the taxes, or they can seize your property or seize your truck. So it's pretty important that you know what you're doing if you're doing business in New Jersey, if you're a motor carrier.
And again, this is primarily for carriers that are based out of other states who may be dropping off one load, two loads, picking up a load from New Jersey. And
Correct.
They are subject to that tax in New Jersey because technically, according to New Jersey, they are doing business in that state. So they are, able to be taxed, essentially. You mentioned the way that New Jersey is doing this. And again, they've had this tax in effect for years, but from what we're hearing out there, they are starting to enforce it again. And the penalties for, I guess they're going after people for back taxes too, it sounds like in this case. And in a lot of ways, we see this when the state is needing, they're a little short on cash, I guess is one way to put it.
Exactly. And we got notified of this by one of our members who was at a warehouse or weigh station, what have you, and was advised that, hey, we know you're doing business in the state, and was threatened with a fine of $10,000. $10,000. I mean, he didn't have the information as to how much business he was doing in New Jersey, so I'm sure that his company was sent out a questionnaire. I think it was maybe two company operator or what have you. He wasn't the main owner of the company, so he didn't know all the forensics of what how much business they did in New Jersey, but the investigator knew that this company had been doing business for some time in New Jersey, and that questionnaire, they send out, will go back and ask you for your tax records for the past 4 years or tax information for the past 4 years and what business you've done the past 4 years in New Jersey. So be ready for that. If you get that letter in the mail, basically make sure you answer the questions and make sure you send it back in, or next time your truck comes into the state, it may be seized or for whatever reasons for tax evasion of some sort. So
Yeah, and it's a real gut punch. I mean, if you're not expecting that and you don't really know the rule there, the law there in New Jersey, it can be a real that can be a real surprise, obviously, if you're not expecting it. And again, as you said there, we're hearing from people who are coming through this. Paul, that aside, New Jersey, from what we can tell, and we've gone over this before in the past, but since it's come up again, we've kind of looked at it again, and you have specifically looked at this. Legally, they are in their right, it seems like, to do this. New Jersey is. And New Jersey is not the only state that's doing this. I know Pennsylvania is one as well. But in this case, New Jersey was well within their right to do this, right?
Sure. They're allowed to tax any business that occurs within the state, and they have to have that nexus connection we've been talking about. They just have to do it in a way that's a fair apportionment of anyone who's doing business in the state. It can't just be willy-nilly or enforced only against certain people who are in the state or certain parties, whatever it might be. So from a constitutional standpoint, this thing unfortunately does hold water. However, it's so new. This new legislation just got enacted last July and recently went into effect. So this is not something that we have a whole lot of experience. We're going to have to wait to see kind of how it develops on how they're actually enforcing it. For example, if they're only hitting interstate truckers with this, stop you, inspect you, maybe fine you, maybe assess your taxes, maybe seize things, that might be something that gets us into the issue of, well, that's unconstitutional. You're only enforcing it against certain parties and not doing it fairly across the board. So to say that it's legal, in the big picture, yes, it is. But the answer, as any good lawyer will always give you, is, well, it depends after that. It depends on how it's enforced.
And I think that's important to kind of underline there, because you may not like it. It may be a gut punch, too, if you find out that, you owe however many, dollars in taxes dating back however many years. You do need to pay that, at least as far as we can tell right now. I mean, legally, right. If you don't pay that, you're probably setting yourself up for a whole bunch of other headaches.
I completely agree on that. And that's something that's important for this legislation, is to understand there's a few thresholds that will cause you to either be exposed to the minimum tax, which looks to be $375, or an elevated tax if you do one of two things. One, if you have receipts that exceed $100,000 in gross receipts for the year, or two, if you have 200 separate transactions in the state in a year. So if you avoid both of those things, you're more than likely looking at just the $375 minimum tax. However, your best defense against anybody who wants to try to tax you for more than that is to have good documentation of everything you've been doing in New Jersey for the last, I would recommend that you exceed 1 year by as much as you possibly can.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I would assume that this is not necessarily news, Doug, for people who are doing business in New Jersey. I would expect that they've heard about this, or as you mentioned, seen that questionnaire. But if there is someone out there listening who has done business in New Jersey, maybe it was a few years ago, or maybe they're currently doing business there as well, what advice would you have for them as it pertains to all this, that's going on right now?
Yeah, I'd have them call the New Jersey Treasury Division of Taxation and see if they are qualified to register within the state of New Jersey. And if they are, go ahead and register and basically say, listen, I did business in the past and this is what I did. Am I subject to the taxes during those years? And in most cases, states will give you some leniency in that area. But the main thing is, I know it's an old law or what have you, and it's obviously updated to last year. But a lot of new motor carriers don't know these things. They get their authority, and they don't know that they are required to register in some states because of these nexus campaigns. Obviously, the state's not going to really hammer you if you obviously ignorance is not part of the law. But if you didn't know about it, and you say, listen, I didn't really know about it, I'm coming forward, I'm trying to do what's best and do what's right, and more likely they, will probably be leaning on you.
Paul, you've, as I'm looking at you, you've got a whole bunch of papers spread out around you, so I know you've been looking into this quite a bit. In everything that you've been looking at there, does anything give you pause in terms of this on a bigger scale, or anything that kind of stands out to you as being a concern in New Jersey or maybe elsewhere? Basically, in your research, what has kind of popped out to you?
Really, it's my concern would be, again, back to enforcement. This nexus test that passes most constitutional tests about, is this legal on a broader scale? Does this affect interstate commerce? That's probably the biggest question we always come across with these is there some type of violation of the Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution? And again, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but I can't say it enough.
Yeah.
If it's being enforced fairly, whether you're a New Jersey trucker or you're a California trucker in New Jersey, if it's being enforced fairly against both, and it's a fee that is proportional to your activity, for example, the $375 minimum, or are you doing $100,000 worth of business or 200 transactions to where it's going to be an elevated tax? Unfortunately, it's going to pass muster in most cases if someone were to file a suit to say, hey, this isn't legal. However, when you get that unfair enforcement, that's when you have something to fight about. That's what we're doing is trying to monitor this as much as we can from member experience, and anybody out there on the road who has an issue with the way this is being enforced. We want to hear about it, because when people ask, what's OIDA doing about this? What are they doing in response? That's our best way to fight this, is to find out about inequitable enforcement and see if there's something we can evaluate there to take action on.
Yeah, I don't want to give anybody any ideas out there. We mentioned that Pennsylvania has in the past enforced this and put this into effect. I guess that would be a different concern,
right?
Is if other states kind of get this idea and start cracking down. That would be a huge concern for people out there, right, who are crossing state lines.
Yes, and there are a small handful of states that are doing this. You mentioned Pennsylvania. We've heard from other people talking about Illinois sending them bills for activity in their state. This is not something new that we've never heard of before. It's just like you were talking about earlier. It's kind of part of the cycle. When states get a little thin on revenue, maybe they find a new way to try to enforce an existing law, or in this case, they amend one to kind of sharpen it up and find new ways to generate revenue.
Yeah. Doug, I want to give you a chance to kind of talk about what OIDA has been doing. Paul mentioned there that, we're monitoring it here in the building, and I know you've been in contact with New Jersey as well. Can you kind of talk about that and what kind of information you're trying to get out of them?
Well, we're just trying to relay the fact that the burden of one motor carrier who is, just doing one load into the state or any state. I mean, if the states start seeing this as a revenue generator, and right now a lot of states are looking at, how to, generate revenue because of the taxes have gone down, the collection of taxes and such. But, it's a burden. I mean, obviously, this continues. We're going to have to probably get some kind of federal legislation passed so that these other states just don't, it's like a domino effect. Hey, get the, these motor carriers to pay $300-400 to us. And if we know it, every state's doing it. And, in this situation, if you go over a certain threshold or, you have to file corporate tax returns in that state, just the burden on motor carriers is unbelievable.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head there in terms of just being hit from all sides with a tax in this state and a tax in that state, and then all of a sudden you're paying taxes in 7 states because you're traveling interstate. It's a huge concern, but good advice there for those doing business in New Jersey. Again, make that phone call and try to get more information out of them and what they're doing there. I think is a good first step. Paul, Doug, we appreciate it. Complicated issue, as I said here, but I think an important one, and hopefully people have gotten some helpful advice out of it. We appreciate it.
You bet.
No problem.
And one more piece of advice here before we take a break. If you are in New Jersey and are approached by someone identifying themselves as a Division of Taxation investigator, they will be carrying a photo ID and a badge. To verify that they are who they say they are, you can call this number, 609-633-8450. Again, 609-633-8450. We'll step out for a quick break here, but hang tight. We're back in just a moment.
Today's rising costs affect everyone. Replace your harmonic damper with a genuine Vibertech TVD viscous damper to prevent costly repairs and downtime. Keep your money in your pocket and your truck on the road with Vibertech TVD. Recommended replacement at 500,000 miles or 15,000 hours.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off Truckstop Load Board Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2024 when you purchase Load Board Pro. Attention professional drivers, do you owe money to the IRS? Integrity Tax Relief Group frees drivers from IRS trouble. Call for help now, 855-976-4291. That's 855-976-4291.
Does the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration do a good job of determining which carriers are safe enough to be on the road? And does their system for doing that need changes or updating? Those questions will be at the forefront as the agency holds a listening session at the upcoming Texas Trucking Show. Welcome back to Landline Now. This is Regulatory Roundup, and I'm Mark Rettig. I'm joined, as always, by OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. Jay, thanks for joining me.
Good to be with you.
Well, glad to have you here as well. Let's start with the basics here. This is going to be at the Texas Trucking Show. When will it take place, and where is the trucking show taking place?
Yeah, so we're going to have an in-person public listening session that's going to be held June 29th. That's Saturday, June 29th at the Texas Trucking Show in Houston. I think it's at the NRG Center down there. Really a trucking show that has grown quite a bit within the last few years. The listening session with FMCSA is going to be held from 1 to 2:30 p.m. Central Time on that Saturday, June 29th. And then we've also learned there's going to be 2 other virtual listening sessions. Registration will be open up soon. One is going to be held, I think, June 25th, and another one at the end of July, July 31st. So kind of a series of listening sessions, a couple online, a couple in person, one in person down in Houston, really to kind of inform FMCSA on their plans to reform the safety fitness determination process.
Well, typically when FMCSA has one of these, they have an idea in mind of what type of information they're trying to get from people. Do we know what questions they'll be asking at these listening sessions, or is this going to be more of kind of just an open forum?
Well, I think it's going to be a combination, and we have a little bit of a taste of what they're going to be trying to get feedback on, dating back to an advance notice of proposed rulemaking that was released by the agency last year, really the first step in kind of gathering information to kind of guide the development of an updated methodology to determine when a motor carrier is not fit to operate, and kind of they laid out about a dozen questions in that advance notice that they took public comment on. The public comment period is closed, but I think these listening sessions are going to be another opportunity to provide some insight for motor carriers, drivers, other industry stakeholders, certainly who are going to be attending the show, and others who can join online that might not be in Houston. A couple of things that the agency plans to discuss: utilizing inspection data and FMCSA's safety measurement system, incorporating driver behavior into safety fitness determination ratings, revising the list of safety violations used to calculate the ratings, adjusting the weights allocated to particular violations, including increasing the weight for unsafe driving violations. Also kind of looking at, kind of the main structure of the safety fitness determination. Right now we've got a kind of a 3-tiered rating system: unsatisfactory, conditional, and satisfactory. Unfit, conditional, and satisfactory. There's been a lot of talk of making it maybe a one-tiered system, 2-tiered system. That's really going to be one of the main questions that FMCSA is going to have to figure out as they potentially reform the safety fitness determination process.
You mentioned the ANPRM, or Advanced Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, and at that stage in the process, OOIDA submitted comments on kind of what the association thinks should be done here. I'm wondering if you can tell us what some of the highlights are of what the association said.
Yeah, so kind of, our outlook on this is that historically the safety fitness determination structure has not been proven as a reliable method to properly determine a motor carrier's fitness to operate. And a lot of the shortcomings relate to the inaccuracy and inconsistency of the data that's analyzed during a safety investigation. Also have, looking back at the data that's come into the system, the vast majority of motor carriers never receive a safety fitness determination rating. And that's kind of, we've seen a negative impact on that, especially for small businesses, small motor carriers who never get a rating. And when maybe a shipper or receiver or broker is looking at ratings, well, they see a motor carrier doesn't have a rating. And, without knowing the ins and outs of the system and how many carriers are never get a rating, kind of pushes away some partners that small businesses could perhaps do business with when they learn they don't have a safety rating. It's not really a negative analysis, kind of given the way the three-tiered system is set up right now. So that's kind of moving forward. We want to make sure that any carrier is not penalized if they never get a rating, because that's probably going to be the most likely outcome. And of course, this one question about the inaccuracy and unreliability of data. Kind of like you look through the questions that were proposed in the ANPRM, there kind of seems to be this notion that FMCSA kind of wants to, use the flawed CSA and safety measurement system as a major component to a new safety fitness determination process. And that's going to create a whole lot of issues kind of given the flaws with that CSA and SMS methodology, which relies on a whole lot of violations that have nothing to do with safety performance. It's very inconsistent depending on where you're operating, what region or state you're operating in. We've seen state enforcement officials kind of prioritize different violations, different citations depending on where you're operating, and that can, really have a negative impact on your score. Certainly the relationship, smaller carrier scores, one bad violation that might not be accurate can have such a drastic impact on their ability to operate compared with larger carriers who receive thousands of inspections or violations to kind of offset one violation. So, and not to mention FMCSA is still working on a whole host of other reforms related to the safety measurement system. And a lot of those need to be really improved before we can kind of incorporate CSA and SMS into safety fitness.
Well, let's get to some practicalities here. How can people take part in this session at the truck show? Is it just show up, or do they have to pre-register?
There is a pre-registration process, but it's for the truck show at large, and that's free to register, and you can do that at the Texas Trucking Show website, just some basic contact information to get signed up. I would encourage anyone who plans to participate in the public listening session at the truck show, if they're there, to arrive a little bit before the 1 o'clock listening session, just to make sure you get signed in, make sure you let FMCSA know that you want to participate. For the truck show, they are asking that comments be limited to 3 minutes. So hopefully they can get through everyone who wants to have their voices heard down in Houston. We still are waiting on some further registration information and logistics on the virtual listening sessions that are going to be held on June 25th and July 31st.
And as I understand it, they also have a method, if you can't make any of those, that
Right.
you can still make your comments. How do you go about that?
Yeah, you can submit public comments online via regulations.gov, and we'll get the docket information and the links for you to do that as well. I think there's a 60-day comment period for that.
And of course, we will have links to where you can register for that truck show and for the virtual sessions, and where you can send your comments at landlinenow.com. Once again, that listening session is at 1 p.m. June 29th at the Texas Trucking Show at the NRG Center. And they have the virtual sessions June 25th and July 31st. Let's go ahead to another topic here, Jay. On March 26th, of course, I think everybody's aware, the Francis Scott Key Bridge, which carries Interstate 695 over the Patapsco River, collapsed. And that's been creating some huge problems for freight traffic, both in and out of the port by ship and, of course, by truck. We do have a few updates here. First, what is the status of the sea channel where the bridge previously stood?
Yeah, after 11 weeks of reconstruction, clearing out the channel, the Fort McHenry Federal Channel at the Port of Baltimore has been fully restored for commercial marine transit. Really quite an accomplishment from federal, state, local agencies and departments that were involved in the clean out, the temporary channels that were reopened, and all the efforts that have been taken place to kind of get the return to the original operating dimensions of the 700-foot wide and 50-foot deep channel. So that has been announced this week. Yesterday, DOT Secretary Pete Buttigieg, Maryland Governor Wes Moore, a whole host of other officials were at the port kind of marking the reopening. The full restoration involved the removal of approximately 50,000 tons of bridge wreckage from the Patapsco River, according to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in the Baltimore district. So it's really been, a nonstop, emergency relief, recovery effort, construction, infrastructure project to get the port, reopened in such a short time. So channel is reopened. Obviously, the bridge remains out. That's going to be quite a bit to get that reconstructed. We have had, the alternate routes opened up in and around the port. Certainly, FMCSA emergency declarations provisions that have been in place and continue to be extended, but really a positive sign that the channel is kind of returned to that normal operating capacity for the moment.
And, of course, you mentioned that emergency order from the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, and people get somewhat confused on those. I'm wondering if you can kind of clarify for people, what does the order do in terms of the hours of service? And I think it also covers something to deal with ELDs.
Yeah, so a few different provisions that have been in the FMCSA emergency declaration that has been in effect since the early days of the March 26 bridge collapse. And, it applies to only motor carriers who are really providing direct assistance. And there's a few different provisions for that. Motor carriers and drivers transporting gas, ethanol, propane, natural gas, and heating oil in and around the Maryland, Baltimore area. Any motor carriers or drivers transporting equipment and supplies, as well as those removing wreckage and debris from the port area. And then ELD relief also remains in effect for motor carriers and drivers who are not required to use an ELD or do not have one installed, including those operating under the short haul exemption. Relief for the motor carriers and drivers transporting fuel and gas products. You get emergency relief from the maximum 11-hour driving time up to a maximum of 2 additional hours. And that was really put in place for some of those alternate routes getting around Baltimore. We've seen some delays due to the lack of the bridge going across the Chesapeake. So these provisions have been in place. The FMCSA last week made their third extension of the emergency waiver. This one is only for 2 weeks' time, and so it's running through June 22nd. And kind of given some of the updates that we've heard, including the reopening of the channel, I'm kind of thinking that this will be the last extension from FMCSA, so that'll be in place for June 22nd. Tune in a couple weeks to see if they make any more extensions or modifications, but kind of given the cooperation among federal, state agencies, local agencies, and industry stakeholders, does seem like it's been quite a monumental task to kind of maintain supply chain efficiency, and kind of looks like to get back up everything and running, and now we'll kind of turn attention to funding and reconstruction of the bridge.
Okay. Well, Jay, we've run out of time, but thank you very much for all the information.
All righty. Thank you.
I've been talking with OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. And folks, we mentioned a number of different links and information that you may need. We will have that at landlinenow.com. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Penske owns and operates some of the best-maintained vehicles on the planet. Our used trucks come with a 5-year maintenance report and pre-sale inspection. So if you're in the market for a top-quality pre-owned truck, look no further. Search our inventory today at PenskeUsedTrucks.com.
Control your toll costs and eliminate tolling headaches with Prepass Tolls. Prepass Tolls means toll volume discounts. Just one invoice for all tolls and fewer violations. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Welcome back. Time now for our weekly jaunt across the United States to see what state lawmakers and policymakers are up to as it pertains to you. Our guide, as always, is Keith Goebel of Landline Magazine, and he joins us here in Studio A now. Keith, how you doing?
Scott, doing all right. How's it going?
Doing just fine over here. We're going to talk truck parking today. It's been really, I think, a hot topic in recent weeks and recent months as we're seeing more awareness about the problem out there. We've got a few states now either taking action or looking to take action. I want to run through these states here because we're seeing some big investments in addressing this crisis. And let's start with Minnesota with a focus there on Interstate 94, it looks like.
Yeah, as you mentioned, a lot of action on this topic across the country. Minnesota, one of the more recently states to, move forward on the pursuit of, offering additional truck parking for where it is heavily needed. Really, the focus. A lot of the focus here in Minnesota is, as you would probably assume, Minneapolis and St. Paul area. But this is part of a larger spending bill that was signed into law here recently by the governor. And previously, they had identified a couple of locations that they wanted to put money into for truck parking. And what this is doing with the spending bill is essentially providing the money to get that done. So for fiscal year 2025, they allotted in the neighborhood of $8 million so that they can construct and expand truck parking off Interstate 94. There were 2 locations that have been identified. The Big Spunk rest area there in Avon and the Enfield rest area. In addition to those 2 projects, again, getting specific to the Minneapolis and St. Paul areas, allotted another nearly $5 million so that they could do either, or at a minimum, 1 truck parking safety project, but they're hopeful of being able to do more than 1 of those projects to benefit their trunk highway system, which a lot of folks are familiar with, being the state highway and interstate system that they have there in Minnesota that connects communities. Trying to add or improve truck safety projects there in, again, the metropolitan areas.
And this action came out of pretty much a direct result of a study that I believe the Minnesota DOT put together a few years ago, and again, highlighted this need that they have there, and they're actually doing something about it. So when we talk about the studies that are happening now and these surveys that are out here, which we've talked about before, it is important to take part in those because there will be action. It may not be, this year or next year or even the year after that, but these states are taking action. So it is encouraging to see that they're taking, this problem seriously and doing something about it. Speaking of which, let's shift here to Georgia now, where we've got a similar thing, right? They recently did a study, and now we've got a plan that's going to come into effect thanks to a new law.
Yeah, of course, through the years, OOIDA has seen studies and discussions and meetings and any other type of words you want to attach to the topic of truck parking, but not a lot of action. Not a lot of getting something done. So yeah, I mean, it is definitely encouraging here, this year specifically, that you're seeing states actually act on studies that have been done, research, and that sort of thing. And Georgia, a year ago, they had a group that got together and met to discuss ways to improve the trucking industry there, specifically in Georgia. And one of the recommendations that came out of that, as you would hope, was a recommendation to expand truck parking options. So there was a standalone bill that was introduced this year and made it through the State House almost. It may have been unanimously that it went all the way through and got the governor's signature and authorizing the creation of a statewide plan that they're going to emphasize to improve truck parking. And of course, obviously, that is something that is very necessary in Georgia. So yeah, it's again looking to improve that particular, as well as widening interstates, improving their intermodal, multimodal capacities there. But yeah, providing more commercial truck parking, definitely something that was identified as definitely being past time that they do something. So they're moving in that direction.
Yeah, and to underscore just how much of a commitment they're making there, this is a 20-year plan. So these things are going to be rolled out over the next 20 years, according to this new law there in Georgia. So we'll see how that all pans out. But again, they're making a commitment and they're sticking with it, which is encouraging. Real quick here, Keith, New Jersey, New York haven't taken action yet, but there's talk there with, several bills about this particular issue.
Some good, some bad. New Jersey, if you're gonna build a warehouse development, or wanting to add a requirement that you provide adequate truck parking. In New York, really the focus is on New York City and trying to make sure, even though they recognize that there isn't adequate available truck parking, they don't want trucks parking there. So anyway, we'll spend more time on that maybe in the weeks to come.
Indeed. Let's shift topics here and shift states to Utah. The state apparently taking aim at road rage, or I guess road ragers here. Enforcement and penalties are being stepped up.
I like your word choice there. They're taking aim at road ragers.
Road ragers.
Hey,
they're out there.
Yeah, Utah, the DOT, they have found that in recent years, over the past 4 years, there's been almost double in the number of aggressive driving deaths that they've had there in the state compared to the past 5 years. So legislation was introduced to address the issue and trying to address it by trying to deter road rage. So essentially just putting in some significant fines and the possibility of prison time if someone is found to doing something aggressively towards another driver, not just giving them the finger, but trying to intimidate or endanger people in another vehicle. So, yeah, putting in some notable fine amounts and the possibility of prison time, as well as there's also the possibility that the vehicle that was used in a road rage incident could be seized. So, yeah, really trying to get tough to address this issue.
Yeah, and this is something I wonder, and maybe you can tell us, but I wonder if other states are going to look at this issue as well, because as we've talked about, especially during the pandemic, we've seen speeding rates go up. I know everybody out there listening to this has seen stupid drivers, bad drivers, aggressive drivers. It seems like the problem is getting bigger and bigger. And as you point out there, the Utah DOT put out statistics that show that essentially in Utah, at least, it is. Yeah. So we'll see what happens there. But again, I wonder if this is an issue that pops up here, as we see the problem grow and grow.
Oh yeah, well, I think it's definite that you're going to continue to states that have been looking to address road rage. They're going to look at a state that actually did something, and they're going to want to see kind of how it played out. In Utah, they want to see how it plays out. Yeah. I mean, this new law that takes effect on July 1st, it has a sunset date. It has a sunset date for the summer of 2028. So if they end up finding out, we kind of missed the mark on this, maybe we just need to revisit the issue. But yeah, definitely, I'm certain. As you talked about, other states are also going to be very interested to see how this works out in Utah.
As am I. Keith, you keep us updated. We appreciate it as always, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Our thanks to Keith Goebel of Landline Magazine for his time, and our thanks to you for yours. You've got a lot of choices out there, so we appreciate you choosing us. And with that, that's our show. We're back tomorrow with another one, and we hope to see you then.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Capital Reman is your leading source for quality remanufactured engines and components. Capital Reman stands ready to serve all OOIDA members to help reduce costly engine repairs or replacement. Visit capitalreman.com today and use code OOIDA10 to save.
Get the most power performance out of your rig with Howe's Diesel Defender. It provides maximum lubricity and contains specialized IDX4 detergent to clean and prevent deposits and safely removes harmful water. Visit HowesProducts.com for more information.
I'm a dad.
A son.
A husband.
Wife.
I'm a writer.
Photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing.
My kids.
Chrome.
And I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.